Right.
Jess, thank you so much for joining me today. As we kick off our conversation, there's something that I'm dying to know. What is the secret to creating great fan fiction?
Understanding of character. Understanding who the characters are as they're written for the show or the movie or the book that you're doing fanfic for. Understanding what their motivations are, not just what your motivations for the story are, but what the creator's motivations for those characters are, and figuring out a way to convey that genuinely. It doesn't have to be accurately, but with a genuine feeling on the page.
I love that. So is that really an understanding of the universe of whichever fandom you're writing the fan fiction, or is it the whichever character is going to be your protagonist of your specific story?
I think both. You need to understand the goals of the kind of universe that the story is about. The kinds of people that exist in Doctor Who are not the same kinds of people who exist in Game of Thrones. The point of the universe is not the same as Tolkien's Lord of the Rings versus even Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. You need to understand the difference between those universes and the message that the creator is trying to communicate with the TV show. And then, of course, what each character does to serve that message within the world of the media text that you are doing the fan fiction of.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I myself have a very long history with fan fiction, so I am very, very aware of that idea. And okay, so this leads to a burning question. If you could only ever write one fan fiction again for the rest of your life, which one would it be?
For one fandom? I get to write multiple stories for one fandom?
Yep. You only get one fandom for the rest of time. You have to leave behind all the other fandoms.
Sailor Moon.
I love it.
There's just so much you could do with it. You can reincarnate Usagi again. You can go back in time. You can go forward in time. There's so many characters. It's a very flexible and massageable world. Yeah.
Awesome. I absolutely love that. So, Jess, thank you so much for joining me today. But first, let me welcome everyone to the Create Right Now podcast. Welcome. I'm Kauffman. I'm on a mission to help writers with the process, lifestyle, and mindset that it takes to be a writer or an author. Our podcast, I invite guests on stream where we will talk about the writing process, craft, technique, or anything else to help you be a better writer. So that way you can grow. That way you can finish that book and hopefully one day make a living and write more books. So welcome to the stream. ML, great to have you in here. LeMay, welcome, my friend. As always, such a pleasure. Now, as we're kicking it off, I have a question to you, the viewer, whether you're watching this on the live stream or on the replay. Do you write fan fiction? What is your favorite type of fan fiction to write? Or is it something that maybe you're interested in writing fan fiction? What fandom have you always loved, but maybe you've been too afraid to write for? Drop a comment. I would love to hear from you. So today we're going to be having a dynamic conversation with Jess, author JM Frey, as she has a background, and clearly you just heard a sneak peek in writing fan fiction with a diverse array of different fandoms. So we're going to be talking about discovering the writer within, what that beginning part of the journey really looks like. We'll talk about fan fiction as a creative apprenticeship. How does one go from fan fiction, transitioning from fan fiction into original works? Sometimes for a lot of writers, it can be a transition. Some writers only write purely in fan fiction. And then make sure to stick around. We're going to do a live reading from JM's book, From Time and Tide. So we're going to be doing that. Make sure to stick around. We'll do some Q&A at the end, and we'll see what advice we can give to you to help you out with your writing journey. So without further ado, JM Frey is an author, voice actor, and lapsed academic. She's appeared in podcasts, documentaries, and on television to discuss all things geeky. Her debut novel, Triptych, I was like, we'll see if I actually got this right, was nominated for 2 Lambda Literary Awards and garnered a place among the best books of 2011 from Publishers Weekly. Since then, she's published the Accidental Turn series, a quadrilogy of a meta fantasy novels, and the SKYLARK'S SAGA, a steampunk adventure duology. Her queer Regency historical fiction novel, Time and Tide, was named one of the New York Times best romances of 2024. Her life's ambition is to step foot on every continent, because there's only 3 left. She lives in Toronto, where she is surrounded by houseplants because she is allergic to anything with fur and chocolate, but not wine. Without further ado, let me welcome back to the stream, JM. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Me is like,
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to talk about this. As you mentioned, fan fiction is one of my favorite topics. It's one of my favorite things. If it wasn't for fan fiction, I wouldn't be a published author. So I love it. I'm going to hype it up as much as I can because there are more than enough people out there who deride it. I want to be on the other side.
Yeah, and I mean, we have so many writers in the community who love writing fan fiction. And I know it's my personal belief that fan fiction is a great way for any writer to start out. Like,
Yes.
because I think it really teaches writers about the craft of writing without having to worry about world building.
Exactly. Fan fiction is, and I just want to clarify, it's not just a stepping stone into a professional career. There's nothing wrong with only writing fan fiction for the rest of your life.
Which a lot of writers do. A lot of writers write purely fan fiction because they love to write in
they enjoy it and they like sharing it. So I just want to preface that for everyone who's listening to this. I'm not ever going to say, I'm going to talk about the wonderful thing about fan fiction, but I'm not ever going to say it's just a training tool or it's just a first step into a real career. Fan fiction is real writing. You're writing, and you're sharing your joy. And that's completely authentic and completely genuine and completely, I don't want to say acceptable because you don't need my permission, but fan fiction, as we're speaking about it today, is not just a stepping stone. But back to what you were saying about great training grounds, it's a great place to learn how to write without having to do the world building. I always equate it to playing with action figures in a sand pit. Someone has provided you with the action figure. Someone has provided you with the sand pit at the local park. You just get to play in it. And while you're doing all of that playing, you learn about character story, narrative arc, textual reading, contextual reading, learning about reading between the lines, learning about the word I'm looking for is effective foreshadowing, stuff like that, right?
I completely agree with that. And I think there's so many areas that we can dive into what is fan fiction. And I know I'm going to want to hear your process, absolutely. But for anybody who's hopping into the stream or who's watching this and they're not really familiar with what fan fiction is, I'm sure everyone out there, I'm sure you've heard of fan fiction before. How would you define fan fiction and what makes it such a powerful tool?
Well, fan fiction, fan crafting in general. So fan fiction, cosplay, which is when you make an outfit based on the show or the TV show or the media text that you like.
Cosplay is very, very popular. You should see that at like conventions.
Love it. I'm a cosplayer. I've cosplayed for years.
I wish I knew how to make costumes. Then I would be a cosplayer too.
I went to theater school. We had to do wigs and makeup and pattern drafting and embroidery and jewelry design. We had to do all of that. So why not make myself look like the TARDIS? Because I can. So there's cosplay, there's fan fiction, there's fan comics, there's fan art, there's filk, F-I-L-K, which is making songs about characters. So all of that kind of fan crafting is basically when, instead of being a passive consumer of a media text, and by media text I mean a radio show or a narrative podcast or a comic or a cartoon or a movie or a TV show or a book series, any of that stuff, instead of just being a passive consumer and enjoyer of it, your adoration for the story bubbles up out of you as a creative impulse, and you make a costume or draw a picture or write a story based on or in this world. And there are no rules about what you can and cannot do with the creative urge that your adoration of this media text feeds you with.
And I think it's actually really interesting. John brings up a really interesting point, because I think a lot of writers think about fan fiction if they're not familiar with having written fan fiction previously. John said they should write fan fiction so they might actually get people to read their work. I think that's a valid answer. Do you feel like a lot of writers treat fan fiction as a stepping stone, so as such it becomes this intermediate category?
I don't think they do. I think people who write fan fiction because they like to read fan fiction. And they read it because they like to read it. And it's not impossible to gain followers through fan fiction, become a big name fan, and then transition into original fiction. Cassandra Clare did that, although there's the controversy about the plagiarism with her Draco Dormienne series. E.L. James went from Twilight fan fiction, scrubbed the serial numbers off it, republished it as 50 Shades of Grey. So there are big name fans that transition into original fic and bring their readership with them. But there are also people who have, like me, I suppose, who have a fandom following for their fandom pen name, and then a readership following for their original work pen name. Writing fan fiction specifically to gain a following, if that's the only reason you're writing it, why are you writing it at all? It's like the people who say, oh, I'm writing a book because I want it to be turned into a movie. Then why don't you write a screenplay? Right?
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting, because write in the medium that you're most passionate about. I do believe that. Granted, I think that the challenge is sometimes there are certain stories based on whatever the story is that would be told or that would be served better and more authentically in a certain type of format. Right. And that's playing to the strengths of like a screenplay or a stage play or a graphic novel or a novel.
Exactly. So if the only reason you're writing fan fiction is to trick readers into buying your real books, then I don't know why you're bother writing in fan fiction. Just write a really good novel and focus your energy on trying to market that. If you are writing fan fiction because you enjoy telling stories and you want to play and you want to experiment and you want to try something that you've never done before you do it in your original work, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the reason, write fan fiction because you want to write fan fiction, whatever the reason is.
Completely agree with that. I absolutely love that. So thinking of your background and your expertise with fan fiction, I'd love to explore that just a little bit. So I know that you began writing fan fiction at a young age.
Yes.
What drew you to it, and how did those early experiences shape you as a storyteller?
So I grew up in an age when the internet was not as ubiquitous as it was. I'm a pre-BlackBerry kind of girl. I didn't even get a cell phone until first year university, I think. And even then it was a Nokia brick. So the internet when I was younger was travel blogs and recipes and stuff like that. And this new TV show had just come on the air called Sailor Moon. And I really enjoyed it. And someone at school said, well, you know that it's based on a Japanese TV show and there's all of these comics that are tell the story. You could read the whole story. You don't have to wait for the new episode to come out on YTV every week. And I was like, that's amazing. Where do I find those? The library didn't have them. The local bookstore didn't have them. It was before manga became this big global phenomenon. most of the time you couldn't even get things translated. If you could get manga, and it was a fan translation. So I went on the internet looking for these extra stories, and I stumbled on someone's fan fiction, and I was like, this doesn't feel like this isn't what the story is. This is somebody else writing a story. You're allowed to do that? Okay, well, if I'm allowed to do that, if people are allowed to tell stories about other people's stories, then I'm going to write a story about Star Trek. I like Star Trek. And then I looked up and I was like, oh my gosh, there are all these magazines where people write stories about Star Trek, and they put them in these magazines, and then they sell them at conventions. I would love to do that.
Oh yeah, those are the original days when shorter writing was the norm. And I think the original Star Trek fan fiction was all Spock and Kirk.
Not all of it. I mean, that's where the term Mary Sue comes from. It's a 1973 story by Paula Smith in a Star Trek zine. But it was the sort of the first, I said, I want more stories based in these worlds I like. And then I went online and I found more stories in these worlds that I liked. And then I was like, well, I could write these. And at the time, writing was just a hobby for me. I was a child actor. So it was just something to do. And when my child actor career ended and I got old, I picked up writing as my professional creative outlet. But I still write fan fiction, and I still read it every day. I love it because it's like comfort food. It's great.
And I think for me personally, what's always drawn me to fan fiction is being able to be involved and explore these fandoms in a new and unique fashion. When I started out writing really early young, I started with online role-playing forums. And I think my early ones were like Harry Potter, say the TV show Heroes. I wasn't any like crazy ones, but I had so much fun. And then I found communities as a way of developing characters and doing story work with others.
Yeah. And I think, one of the wonderful things about fan fiction is there was this thing in the early 90s that people were doing where, there were challenges like give the characters your job, whatever it is that you do for a living, take the characters and put them. So instead of in Stargate, instead of going through a Stargate to travel other worlds, maybe they're marine biologists because that's what you do. We were all obsessed with marine biologists in the 90s. I don't know why. But maybe that's, share your world through these fan fictions. And I think that's one of the great things about fan fiction too, is getting the chance to insert your voice in places where the original media text does not allow for it. So you mentioned Harry Potter. There's this really great essay by Hellickson and Boos called Keeping Promises to Queer Children, Making Room for Mary Sue at Hogwarts. And I recommend this essay every time I talk about fan fiction because it's a wonderful explanation about how and why people with marginalized identities and silenced voices write fan fiction. And it really explains why you see so many gender swapping fan fictions or queer fan fictions or race swapping fan fictions or things like Omegaverse, where the roles in a patriarchy society are swapped. And the main character, who is a cisgendered white man with all of the power the patriarchy provides, is suddenly considered a baby making, less than human, barefoot in the kitchen kind of.
That totally makes sense because it gives more community. It gives more writers able to represent other types. I actually really love that.
It's like driving a wedge into the story and making space for yourself. There are no queer kids in Hogwarts, but I'm queer. So if I went to Hogwarts, here's my space. Deal with it.
ain't that the truth? Yeah. One more time, what was the name of it? And I'm going to drop it in the chat if anyone in our community wants to check it out.
Keeping Promises to Queer Kids, Making Room for Mary Sue at Hogwarts by Hellickson and Boos, Busse.
Keeping Promises to Queer Kids, Making Room
for Mary Sue at Hogwarts.
Awesome. I just dropped that in the chat for anybody who wants to go check it out. So I think fan fiction has clearly been a big influence and a big part of your life. Can you share some of the fandoms that you or characters you loved writing about when you were just starting out?
Sailor Moon, Dracula the series, which was a 2-season children's show that aired in Canada in 1991 and 1992.
Okay.
Forever Night, which is another vampire story that aired in Canada in 1996. 96 to 98, I think. The Vampire Chronicles, of course, but I didn't write in early fandom because Anne Rice was one of those writers who was sending cease and desists to people who were working in fandom. So it's very funny now that she's passed away, and the Interview with the Vampire TV show and Mayfair Witches TV show
I know
are on there, and people and like the marketing is like, hey, what's your vampire persona? Like, if you could have a story with Lestat, what would it be? And it's like, I was there. I don't cite the old magic to me, witch. I was there when Anne Rice used to take us all to court.
Interview with a Vampire. I think the TV show really quick side note. I think for anybody who wants to understand why adaptations can or can't work, when we compare the Interview with a Vampire, the original action movie, and then we compare the TV show serves the characters more faithfully, whereas the original movie with Brad Pitt,
even though
Tom
it was
Cruise,
written by Anne Rice,
did do well. It did do well as a movie, but it didn't serve the core character journeys. And instead, they want it to be more of like an action movie that represented the stars.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that, of course, the film script was written by Anne Rice, so it doesn't matter that the original author wrote it. It was a subpar adaptation, which is why when people say, "Oh, well, do you want to? You're a screenwriter. Do you want to adapt your own books?" My answer is absolutely not. Whoever it is that wants to adapt my books wants to adapt it for a reason. They have.
I would love to adapt my own stuff. I've also spent many years as a screenwriter. But I feel, but I think I think understanding how to do an adaptation, like we've talked about this in the community before, is a bit of an art form, because we've seen how adaptations are done so poorly many times.
I feel like there's a reason why someone was drawn to my story, and I would like to give them the space to explore that reason and not have me bully them into doing something, because I think that that's what should happen. I think
I would love how George R. R. Martin did it with Game of Thrones. I think he was involved with it, at least through the first couple seasons. But he wasn't the one who was leading the charge on writing all of the scripts. I think that would be
story consultant. That's what I would love to do. So fandoms, all the vampire stuff, Master of Mosquiton, Dragon Ball, and then from there, of course, Dragon Ball. Hello, Star Trek, not Star Wars so much. I didn't really get Star Wars when I was younger. I'm not going to say I prefer Star Trek over Star Wars, but I get the storytelling and the pacing better of Star Trek.
Okay.
And then Stargate, all the stars really. Stargate Atlantis, which was very awkward when one of the Stargate Atlantis actors moved in next door to me. And I was like, oh, I have written love scenes about how blue your eyes are. Hi, neighbor. That's the problem with living in Toronto and living where I live, which is in the studio district. I moved here because I'm an actor, and so did all the other actors. And then from there, Harry Potter, Sherlock. Sorry, I'm just going through the fan fictions in my head. And then Sandman has been the most recent.
Wow. So, and very, very clearly, you've written your share of fan fiction. You've been in more than enough fandoms throughout your life. So I know a lot of writers who are working on their own stories in the community are probably thinking along this line. So how would you say, or how did your background in fan fiction influence your approach to writing your original stories later on? So I know you have many, many published books under your in your catalog.
Yeah. So the thing with fan fiction is, the one thing I really like about fan fiction is that the original media text has already told the obvious story from the obvious point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like about fan fiction, what you can do in fan fiction is you can choose to tell a story from a side character's point of view, or
Mm-hmm.
choose to tell an aspect of the story that people would normally leave off the page or leave off the screen. And
Mm-hmm.
it lets you get at the story in different backwards, hooky, sideways ways. And I think that, I mean, I know for a fact that has definitely influenced my original fiction because, for example, Time and Tide, this is where I show off all the books that are in a pile beside me. There we go.
Love it.
Time and Tide
Love it.
is about a bisexual disaster from the 21st century who falls back in time and ends up in a period drama, Bridgerton style period drama, and is trying to survive it. And you would think that the ideal person to fall through time would be the one who's obsessed with period dramas.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought, ooh, what if I do that thing that I do in fan fiction and I choose the non-obvious character? What if it's the ex-girlfriend of the person who is obsessed with period dramas?
Mm-hmm.
So she was forced to watch period dramas with her girlfriend, but was never really engaged with it. And now she's stuck in Regency England going, what did Mr. Darcy do? Because I've always liked, I like Outlander.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a storytelling contrivance that whoever falls back in time is going to have the skills that they need to survive. So, of course, Claire Randall, now Claire Fraser, was a World War II combat nurse, or combat nurse, but who liked herbology and healing stuff as a hobby. Ooh, what a coincidence. And then she falls back in time to the 17th century where her knowledge of plants helps her survive. I like the idea of what if it was the least prepared person.
Okay.
So then my example for The Untold Tale, which is the first book of the Accidental Turn series.
Okay.
I came up with this world, this very sort of Game of Thrones, kind of Piers Anthony Xanth, Robert Jordan, Wheel of Time, Tolkien kind of fantasy-esque world. Named the hero, named the sidekick, named the horse, named the sword, did all of that, and then said, okay, and now the story's being told by his overlooked, bullied little brother.
Okay.
So what does this world look like through the eyes of that kid who watched his brother leave at the age of 17 and save the world and then come back home, having learned none of his responsibilities, having accepted none of his responsibilities. So the little brother has been stepping up for the heroic brother this whole time. And he's the one who gets, I kept the family estate running. Why are you the one who gets knighted by the king? So, yeah, and then Triptych, the debut novel, was actually...
I hope I pronounced Triptych. Okay.
Yeah, Triptych. It actually was Stargate fan fiction when I started it, and I got about halfway through the story, and I was like, I feel like I could do this one as an original story. So I went back and I started writing it from the beginning. But I wanted a story about where the aliens come to Earth, and they're not invaders, and they're not monsters, and they're not non-human, but they're not creatures. They're not here to kill us or enslave us or steal our natural resources. They're refugees. And how would we react, especially in the 21st century with our stellar track record of how we as human beings treat refugees and immigrants? No comment. What would that look like when it's a ship full of fuzzy blue aliens who believe that marriages should come in threes?
So it sounds like, and what I'm hearing is that you've, from being involved in a lot of these fandoms, through being involved in watching the media, consuming the media portion of it, and then creating the characters or creating the worlds in the fan fiction, you learned a lot of those storytelling mechanics and a lot of storytelling principles that worked. And then in your own original stories, you asked yourself, how can I frame a different what if scenario kind of like this, but doing it like my own spin.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a very JM Frey thing to do. If you're going to talk about the brand of my work, it's the unobvious narrator telling what ought to be the popcorn blockbuster plot, but from sideways.
Awesome. Well, I really, really love that. And I think what we're going to dive into next is I want to dive a little deeper into that transition from fan fiction to your original work. But first, I just want to welcome everybody into the Create Right Now podcast. If you're just hopping in, we're having a fun discussion about fan fiction and how you can really leverage fan fiction, whether you just want to write fan fiction stories or maybe you're pursuing a goal of writing your own original stories. We're just diving into it. So if there's any questions that you have, drop them in the comments. We'll throw them up during our Q&A. And if you're enjoying the stream, follow and subscribe. We're here every day with the Right Now community, 460 consecutive streams and counting. If you're looking for a daily writing community, this is the place. Our podcast airs on Sundays where we interview and invite authors on to just talk about the writing process. So stick with us and we're going to continue on into fan fiction as a creative approach. So Jess, you've described fan fiction as an apprenticeship to the fandom community. How has this apprenticeship contributed to your skills in character development and narrative structure?
Well, before you can write fan fiction, you have to understand the media text you're consuming. And I'm not saying that you have to sit down and do a 10-week course about, the structure of Supernatural, but watching it and watching it purposefully, which is what a lot of fan creators do, will help you even just by osmosis absorb story structure, character structure, motivation, foreshadowing, all of those things. You can't help but learn all of those tools for storytelling when you're absorbing stories with as much purpose as fan creators do. And then you get to try them out. So like an apprentice being given a piece of wood and a knife and saying, okay, you watched me make the toy duck. Now you try to make the toy duck. It's going to take some practice. You might cut your finger. You might create the worst duck on the planet. You might out the gate create the best duck on the planet. But watching a master create the duck and then taking your wood and your knife and trying to make your own duck is going to teach you, maybe not this duck might not be great, but the next duck might be great, or the next duck after that. And to stretch this metaphor as far as it can go, when other people look at the duck, they may say, well, this is a great duck, but you forgot its wings. So in fan fiction, not only are you learning to analyze story and internalizing how story works and how it works well, and then trying to make your own stories, your own characters, and again, practicing with pre-existing pre-mods, basically, before trying to do it with original work, original plots, original worlds, original characters. You're also learning how to take critique, or how to work with a beta reader, or how to work with an editor. Like if I'm Canadian.
Is that because when you're writing fan fiction, you're getting more feedback from that community when people are responding to it? Because a lot of times in a lot of fan fiction type communities, I'm not super familiar with too many of them. I know AO3 is one platform where basically you can put your work out there, you put the story out there for everyone to read and consume. They can leave comments or they can leave feedback.
Yes.
Is that kind of what you're referring to, that process?
Yes, but also because we're a community, we do help each other. So there are times when, like as a Canadian, I wrote some Sherlock fan fiction. I sent it to a British person and I said, can you please do a sensitivity read? We call it Brit picking. Can you please do a read on this and make sure that I'm using the right words, that I'm using, when I say pants, I mean trousers, because when you say pants, you mean underwear. So you do learn how to work with other people. And one of the really interesting things about fan fiction, now personally, I've never been able to do this except for the last fan fiction I put out. It's the only time I've been able to do this. But there are people who will write a chapter and post it, having written nothing else and not knowing what they're going to do next. So learning to take ideas and feedback from the community. If people are like, I think this should happen next, and you as a writer go, I think that's a fantastic idea. It's better than what I was going to do. I'm going to do that instead. It's about editing your stories on the fly. It's about learning how to work with your own creative process. And regrettably, because internet, it also teaches you how to deal with bullies and bad critique and flaming. And in my case, a horrible stalker who encouraged people to break beer bottles over the back of my head at the awards ceremony I was going to for my original work.
I'm so sorry to hear that. That must have been a lot. That must have been traumatizing.
But part of being an original writer, part of being an author, part of publishing your work means that there are going to be people who hate it. Maybe not you. I hope nobody gets a stalker because it's awful. But there are going to be negative reviews. There are going to be 1-star reviews. And it's quite interesting. I have friends who only ever wrote original. They never wrote fan fiction. They dove straight into publishing original work. And their relationship with Goodreads and the bad reviews on Goodreads and Amazon is very different from my relationship, because I have been reading negative reviews or negative comments on my fan fiction for decades. You can't.
So it feels like you're a little more either desensitized or you know how to better handle negative feedback.
So as a writer, fan fiction gives you the ability to learn all the tools, to practice all the tools, to practice working with positive critique, and to practice with handling negative critique.
Wow, I absolutely love that. So it sounds like you've explored a lot of different facets just from writing fan fiction and from fan type communities. So how would you say engaging with fan communities and receiving feedback influenced your growth as a writer?
Makes me very aware of my typos. Yeah, and the fact that Canadian English is a hybridization of British English and American English. So I put the U in color, but I put the Z in analyze. And it is a Z. Deal with it. So yeah, there's a lot of that. But I think for me, honestly, just having people there saying, I loved this, I want to read the next chapter, I'm engaged, I'm hooked, has really helped me have the motivation. Like, I'm not writing specifically for accolades, but it's very difficult when you're writing something original. It's not going to come out for 3 years. It's hard to be excited about it because you have no idea if anyone else is excited about it. Meanwhile, the Sandman fanfic I posted in 2022, I put out the first chapter and everyone was like, oh my God, I can't wait for the rest. And it was so motivating and it was so energizing in a time when I was extremely burned out, just horribly, horribly burned out from a couple of crashes and burns with my original fiction, that I thought I was going to give up writing forever.
No.
I ended up writing 60,000 words in 11 days. And then the entire series.
60,000 words in fan fiction?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And a mostly original story too. It was like, if this is the story, like this much of it was Sandman and this was the rest of it was like original.
Wow. Okay.
So it was only tangentially a Sandman fan fiction. But like 60,000 days, like 60,000 words in 11 days, that's half the time of NaNoWriMo in plus an extra 10K. Like,
wow.
I was just like, oh, right. Yeah. Writing's fun. I forgot that. Storytelling is supposed to be enjoyable. Right. Because especially
it almost feels like you lost that, not lost, but it's almost like you forgot about that with having gone to your original stuff because you started out with fan fiction. That's what you loved.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm never going to whine about being a professionally published author.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that it's a privilege in a lot of people's dreams, but
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a job
Mm-hmm.
and it stops being fun. And I mean, like, I'm writing a book right now that has been asked for by my readers and my
Mm-hmm.
publisher. And I like the idea. I came up with the idea. Obviously, I like it, but it feels like a chore.
Mm-hmm.
There's something else. I don't know. I enjoy it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not filling me with that spark and passion. I think that's why I don't write series, because it's set in a world I've already explored. I feel like I've told all the story I need to tell here, but I've been asked for more, and they're going to pay me. So why wouldn't I do it? Except that I'm having
It just
trouble
doesn't
getting the
feel
spark and
you.
passion for it. It feels like a chore.
Interesting. So,
Yeah.
have you yet figured out a process to balancing the aspects of being a professional author with your love for writing?
I mean, every time I feel uninspired, I just look at my rent check, my rent bill. But it's I'm still getting to tell stories, so it's still wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And I read fan fiction
Mm-hmm.
to just remind myself of the joy of storytelling, and that
And I think
usually.
I can totally resonate with that. I mean, I spent so many years working in customer service
Mhm,
and doing writing as a side thing until
mhm,
I finally restarted everything, quit that completely, and then went full time in on this writing journey.
yeah,
And that's not to say, like, being a new business owner, there's highs and lows. And in the challenging times, I'll have to pull myself back and be like, I'm able to spend so much time writing and doing the things that I love. And I have to, it's almost like reminding yourself
yeah,
with the challenges and the obstacles. So it's almost like keeping an awareness, like, well, 5-10 years ago, like that's
yeah.
when I.
What I'm complaining about is what I wished for,
Mm-hmm.
um, but for me, it was going back to fan fiction again
Mm-hmm.
and being like, I'm so burnt out. I'm not enjoying this. I'm really struggling. I'm just going to write a fan fiction because
Mm-hmm.
I can and I want to, and I feel inspired by this story. And I did, and it was lovely. And I came out of it going, oh, right. Yes. Right. This is why I do this. And it did energize me to start working on other things. So every time I sit down to the book I'm working on now and I'm like, ugh, I don't hate. I make it sound like I hate the book. I don't. I think it's a great idea. I just,
It just doesn't fill you with that same exact passion that you've had for
yeah,
previous projects, it sounds like.
yeah, and because it's commissioned work.
Mm-hmm. So So I know we have a lot of writers in the community who are working on fan fiction and then also working on original content. So there's usually a mix of both. And I
Hmm.
know you've spoken to a couple of obstacles that writers have faced generally. Were there any specific challenges that you faced when you first transitioned from fan fiction to original work?
I mean, not really. The only thing is that an editor that I worked with for my first couple books was like, "Oh, this phrase is very fanficky," and I was like, "Yes, and."
This phrase is fanficky.
Yeah, well, because the thing is, there's a lot of tropes that developed in fan fiction
Mm-hmm.
that then, as writers did both, or
Mm-hmm.
as it became more popular in the community, or as people who grew up reading fan fiction started to read, mainstream romance,
Mm-hmm.
um, those tropes have now invaded original fiction. So what was when I started writing, because I published my first book in 2011 and I
Mm-hmm.
wrote it in 2007. So what was people going, oh, this sounds a little fanficky, is now people going, ooh, this sounds really fanficky.
Mm-hmm.
Woo! Same words, different tone. Um, so there was a little bit of that, and
A
I
little
did
bit.
have the danger of being, while I was making characters,
Mm-hmm.
I have to make sure that I'm not doing pastiches or I'm not doing duplicates of existing characters. I love that this character from that show, I need a character like that for this story, but I can't write that exact person. And there are times where I catch myself like writing in an actor's tics and going, whoa, no, 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 no. I have to do something else. I have to pick something different. But beyond that, I didn't really find any problems moving from one to the other. Now, I have heard of some writers who are relatively popular on, say, AO3 or fanfiction.net, writing an original book and submitting it. And one of the big five, big publishing house decides they're going to take it. And they usually do like a scan for the text online just to make sure that you're not plagiarizing someone. And sometimes they find your fan fiction because all authors have a specific cadence they write in, a specific voice they write in, and specific descriptions and metaphors and idioms they like to use. So I know of some stories where like a major author with a big five contract had to go into a board meeting and explain, yes, I did write that Harry Potter smut when I was 19 years old. That's mine. I'm not plagiarizing. That's me. So there can be problems with that. But as scratching the serial numbers off of fan fiction and republishing it as original fiction has become more popular, I find that publishers and editors are more understanding of it and less judgmental. Like the Love Hypothesis was originally a Raylo fan fiction. And even when you look at the cover, you can see that the male love interest character looks like Adam Driver. You're like, oh, okay, all right. It used to be that when you say, oh, this used to be a fan fiction and I scrubbed the serial numbers off of it and now it's original, people would say, ugh. And now they're like, ooh.
So I think looking then at the exact opposite side of this, how did your experience with fan fiction prepare you for the process of publishing your debut novel, Triptych?
Oh, well, it's Triptych.
Triptych. I keep saying Triptych.
Triptych is a piece of art that is spread across 3 panels. So generally speaking, it's a tabernacle. So it'll be like 3 panels that fold in on one another. So you can put it at the altar of a church and then open it up and reveal all 3 panels of the art, but it all makes one piece. That's what a triptych is. So triptych,
interesting.
Single story told. It's only 3 chapters long. It's told from the point of view of 3 separate characters, none of whom are the main character. And it tells 3 different points of her life and her love story. So that's why it's called Triptych. But what prepared me from fanfiction, I mean, exactly what I said before is I walked into Triptych. It was the second original novel I'd written and the first one that I tried to sell. And when I did sell it, or land it, because you keep your IP, you don't actually sell anything. I had already worked with beta readers and editors and Brit pickers and commenters. So having these conversations with the editor for the first time didn't scare me. Now I was a child actor, so I also had the advantage of dealing with directors and working with other creatives who give feedback. It's very weird. Writing is the only creative pastime where people think that it has to be, it's only a work of staggering genius if it's done in isolation. But Ariana Grande is allowed to have a singing coach. Like, that's not true. Any writer who says, I'm perfect just the way I am, doesn't understand the value of working with creative professionals whose job it is to make you better at what you do. So sitting down with my editor for Triptych, I had experience getting feedback and revising and editing and all of that stuff. So I had no problem with it. And I didn't have a negative reaction to my editing letter because I'm completely used to getting 5 pages of somebody saying, this doesn't work because. And in fact, I think I would never have sold Triptych if I didn't have the experience with fan fiction, because it was originally declined. I had 64 rejections on Triptych. I met the editor who eventually signed it actually at a party. And she read it, and after a couple months declined it and said, I don't think this is, I like it. I like the voice. I like the concept, but there's something wrong with it. I don't think it's fixable. I'm sorry, I'm going to decline it. And I said, if you give me a list of stuff that you think is unfixable, I'll fix it. And then I'll give it back to you. And she was like, I don't think you can. And I was like, challenge accepted. And I did. And I rewrote what she said was wrong with it in the summer. And I gave it back to her, and she offered on it. I think it was Christmas Eve.
Wow. What was it? Her problems, were they major developmental issues?
They were. Yeah.
Okay. So she thought, she's like, all right, there's so many developmental issues that it's probably more difficult to fix than the author's able to. And then you were able to prove that clearly it was fixable.
Yeah. But because I have worked in fan fiction so long, I know how to take a story and change it and still make it mean the same thing. I know how to take that moment in a plot and do something else completely different and still get the characters where they need to be. I've practiced that. I know how to do that. So when she said this, and this, I went, bet. And I did it because I had the practice.
And I think that just goes to show, once we start putting our stuff out there, regardless of what medium we're writing in, I think being able to receive that feedback and then figure out how to solve the problems is such a key to success. Because if you hadn't, if you weren't able to fix the problems that they had shared, then they probably wouldn't have picked it up later.
Exactly. Well, she said that. I mean, I spoke with her a couple years later, and I said, why was that a test? Like, what were you doing? And she said, well, yeah, of course it was a test. Every time you're given a revise and resubmit, it's a test. Because first off, it's a personality test. Are you going to flip me the bird and tell me to go F myself? And have that.
I said, I wonder if they get that from writers.
Oh, they do. Oh, they do. Because I'm now friends with some of these editors that I've worked with. So beyond our professional relationship, I actually have conversations with them. And the stories they tell me. The editor I worked with is actually an agent now. And, she'll message me and say, my God, these people, when I give them a rejection, the way they behave, do they not realize that they've immediately blacklisted themselves? Like when an agent says...
That's so interesting. I wonder if that's because it's so difficult to get to an agent. And then once you get through querying and once they respond, then it feels like it's an attack, or writers feel like it's an attack on their work, which is rather unfortunate. But such a missed opportunity. Because even if you get rejected, I like yourself, I'm like, all right, well, I'll just fix it. There's 1,000 others out there.
Yeah. And sometimes they do give you a revise and resubmit, and they do want to see the book again. And it's partially a personality test, but it's also, can you take the feedback? Can you become a better writer? Can you be guided by me? And this whole knee-jerk thing, there's something I end up saying this in every podcast I do, but writers out there, actors out there, I'm going to look directly down the camera. It's not about you. If you get rejected, it's not because you suck. And there's Natalie Dormer as an actor. And this is, I saw her say this in a couple of interviews. And now I was a child actor long before Game of Thrones existed. And long before she was doing the interview circuit. But the way that she explains auditions is the way that I have always approached my creative life before I even heard her say this. But what she says is, when you walk into a room for an audition, or you walk into a room holding a manuscript in your hand, physically or metaphorically by submitting it to an agent's inbox, the people on the other side of that table, the executive producers, the casting directors, the co-stars, whoever is there, they want you to be the correct answer. There is a hole in their puzzle, and they want you to walk into that room and fill that puzzle piece whole. perfectly. They want you to be the right person more than you want to be the right person. Every time someone walks in the room, they're like, this is it. This is the person who's going to solve our problem. Every time an editor or an agent opens up their inbox, they're like, this is it. Today is the day I'm going to find that manuscript that I can sign. And if you open your mouth and you start singing in that audition and you're an alto and they need a soprano, that's not your fault. If you open your eyes and your eyes are blue, but they've cast the rest of the family and they need actors with brown eyes, that's not your fault. If they open up your manuscript and it's a romantasy, and what they really wanted was a science fiction because an editor at some houses reached out to them and said, I need a science fiction as a tentpole for this year's catalog, that's not your fault. And when they say no, thank you, it has nothing to do with you. So don't be a prick back to them.
I think what's really beautiful about that sentiment, whether you are a writer, an actor, or in some other creative art form, I think part of the key to success is trying to put ourselves on the other side of the table and try to understand that awareness of what it feels like, right? Like you said, they are looking for the ones who are A, they can represent, and then B, is also going to make them money. And sometimes they're mutually exclusive, but they are also inundated, especially in Hollywood. I'm sure it's very similar in Canada. I'm sure they're inundated with actors, screenwriters, publishing companies. Indie publishing are inundated with writers trying to reach out at all time. Agents are inundated with query letters. So when you have an influx of hundreds, probably sometimes even thousands of people reaching out, how do you filter based on specifics, which is why it's our role as professionals in this day and age to research, so we are going towards the exact ones that we know are looking for our style, right? Because if we, I mean, sure, we can try everywhere, but if we try somewhere and they're not looking for us, but something hooked them, now we've just wasted our time. And then, like you said, then we get frustrated when we get that rejection because we weren't able to do the research to cast the net in a certain direction.
And on top of that, things change. I'm currently querying for my third agent. I have had 2 agents previously. The first one just turned out not to be a good fit. His values and my values did not align. And after about a year, I was like, I don't think that I'm ever going to write the kind of story you want me to write. And I don't think I want to be the kind of writer that you want me to be. So we're not working out. My second agent was really lovely and sold 6 books. And I enjoyed working with her very much. But after those 6 books, I pitched an idea and she's like, I don't get it. And then I pitched another idea and she's like, I don't get it. And I pitched another idea. She's like, I don't get it. And I wrote entire novels. She rejected Time and Tide. She didn't get it. She didn't understand what it was. She's not an idiot. I'm making her sound like an idiot. She's very, very good at her job. But being very, very good at her job did not mean she was very, very good at me. And increasingly what I was doing and what she represented no longer matched. And there's a saying, which is, if your agent is not holding your hand and walking down the path with you, they're blocking it. So we parted ways and I leaned into what I was doing harder. And now I'm looking for a third agent who gets what it is that I do and where I want to go with my career.
Well, I absolutely love that, Jess. Thank you so much for sharing that part of your writing journey. I think, speaking of your books and some of your writing, let's hop into the live reading. I would love to hear. So we're going to do a live reading excerpt from JM's book, Time and Tide. So I'm going to throw that up here, and we're gonna hop over here. So as you can see, I pulled up this is just the Amazon page with the cover over here. And I have it all set here. So before we get into it, for our community, is there any setup that you want to share with them for anybody
Yes.
who's not familiar? What are we listening to?
Actually, can you give me a minute and a half? I just want to run and grab something to drink because I just realized if I'm going to read for 3 pages, just give me 1 minute. I will be right back. So talk amongst yourselves, ask some questions, enjoy this page. Literally 60 seconds. I will be right back.
Awesome. So real quick, while Jess gets that all set up, how are you doing? So we've been talking about different areas of fan fiction for the past hour. Now, I know that I recently I haven't written fan fiction, but I used to very early on in my writing journey. What types of fan fiction are you working on? I would love to hear. Are you planning on publishing some of your fan fiction? Are you on sites like AO3 or fan fiction? And you're trying to put your stuff out there, or are you using it more for practice? I'm very, very curious about that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a live reading, an excerpt from Jess's book, Time and Tide. And then we'll hop into the Q&A portion where if you have any questions for Jess, if there's anything that you want to know about writing fan fiction or developing your stories with your fan fiction experience in mind, drop a question and we will throw it up on the screen. Okay. Perfect.
Thank you for your patience, everybody. It's my little water bottle was empty. So.
Got to make sure that you are hydrated, definitely for a live reading.
Yes. Okay, so what you need to know about Time and Tide, it is a time slip sapphic regency romance where the main character, Sam, has fallen back in time. She doesn't know how, she doesn't know why. There's no way to go back. The only thing she can do is survive. And what she has done is attached herself to Fenton, who is the captain of the ship that rescued her when her plane crashed in the middle of the Battle of Trafalgar. And she tried to seduce him in order to secure herself because she was like, if I'm married to a captain, by the time we hit shore, then I should be protected as a single woman with no money, no name, no ability to work, nobody to vouch for me in this world. But what Sam has actually done is fallen in love with Fenton's little sister, Margaret. And the secret is that Margaret is about to become a world famous author. And Sam is aware of the fact that right now, Margaret, basically a Jane Austen analogous character, is in the middle of writing the manuscript that is eventually going to make her famous. And Sam is kind of freaking out about this a little bit. So we are in Sam and Margaret's bedroom. They're sharing a room while they're traveling because it was very, very normal back then to share beds. Fenton is about to get married to Eliza, and they are at Eliza's house preparing for the wedding. So we're going to start there.
Excellent.
Fenton interrupted us to convey an invitation to Eliza from his mother, who was now awake and ready for visitors. Iris had brought the bride a gift of lace for her trousseau and wanted to discuss the best use of it. As I was still in my PJs, Fenton stood carefully outside the door. Eliza bid me adieu and kissed him sweetly on her way past. Fenton lingered just long enough to tell me that he'd managed to sell my old smartphone for an obscene amount to some fascinated science kook in London. It was far more than I ever would have earned in prizes, he said, more than enough for my needs, and I think perhaps you are very proud, Samantha, but I beg you to take this along with my deepest thanks. He held out a leather pouch that clinked softly when I accepted it. You know, I don't know what this is worth, I told him. It's enough to purchase some clothing of your own, to pay for your share of the meals and carriages until the wedding, and for several months of your lodging with my sisters and mother. It will tide you over comfortably. I could give you more if you desire. This is enough. As soon as I start teaching, I'll be self-sufficient. It was your little device, after all. It was a gift, Fenton. Shut up and accept it. He dimpled at me. I do so enjoy your turns of phrase. I snorted. Right. Now get out. I'm practically naked. Lucky, then, I have managed to winkle a spare dress out of Miss Gale's lady's maid, Daisy said. Sorry, Daisy is Margaret. Appearing over Fenton's shoulder. You are dismissed, little bird. Aye, aye, Commodore, Fenton said, tossing off a rigid salute and marching away like a toy soldier. Our room is turned into town square. I stepped aside so Daisy could come in. Feels like everybody's dropped by today. Nearly everyone, Daisy said with a sarcastic twist. The linen draper is downstairs. I could invite him up if you so desired. Yeah, I'll pass, I said as I skimmed out of my dressing gown. What is a linen draper? Daisy gave me another one of those pinning me to the corkboard looks before shaking her head a little in disbelief. A seller of cloth. Here is a chemise for you. Quick now. Turn and I shall tie off your stays and dress. The dress itself was taupe, made of a serviceable cotton and printed with a repeating pattern of dark brown and mustard yellow daffodils. Daisy lingered at the nape of my neck, the soft skin inside my elbow, the vulnerable tops of my feet as she checked the length. I tensed to suppress a shiver. She didn't mean it like that. No matter how much I wanted her to mean it like that. Are you much recovered from your queer turn? At some point, I was going to have to stop finding people using the word queer that way funny. Today wasn't that day, though, and I snorted. Taking it to mean something deeper, Daisy gave the ties at the back of my dress one final tug and stepped away. When I turned to face her, she was staring out the window, stiff-backed and pouting. Daisy, are you okay? Have I done something amiss? What? Daisy gestured at her writing desk, which she had closed up into a case and tucked beside her trunk. You have spent all morning behaving oddly around me, and I suspect it is due to that. No, I said. I mean, yes, but no, there's nothing wrong. She whirled to face me, fists clenched and fire in her eyes. Then what, pray tell me, do you find so distasteful? You call my writing good, yet you are overcome with nerves from just a few paragraphs. I know it is not a ladylike pastime, yet you say you eschew such rigid roles in society, yet you behave as if my hobby offends you. You call me friend, but share secrets with my brother that you will not disclose to me. You find my proximity uncomfortable. You shrink from my touch. You disdain to share a bed with me, sleeping against the wall or on the furthest edge, yet you stare at me when I speak, as if I am a greater orator than any who yet lived. You bewilder me, Samantha Franklin. I confused her? Daisy, I don't. Honestly, I don't know how to explain it. I scrubbed my hands through my hair, frustration and confusion sparking along the underside of my skin, an itch I didn't know how to soothe. Please, try, Daisy begged, and the way she said it curled around my heart like a lover's fingers. I do not know what I want, only that I cannot bear to lose your regard over my scribbling. I swear you haven't, I promised. I held out my hands and she gripped them immediately. It's amazing what you do. I know how fiercely you have to carve out and defend your time. You're right to do it, because I read about it in a book 200 years from now, and I think it's incredible. Then why do you recoil? Because Oh, fuck. I was going to do it. I was going to kiss Margaret Goodenough. Daisy. I slipped my hands up her arms, cupped her shoulders, rolled up onto my tiptoes. Daisy's mouth parted in confusion, then in surprise as I leaned closer and tilted my head. Then in anticipation as she understood what I meant to do. Her tongue was a pink, wet flash against her bottom lip. Her spun gold lashes fluttered as we— Daisy! Marigold called from the hall, harsh and sudden. We startled apart like cats doused with a surprise bucket of cold water, though with less yowling. Make haste, Marigold added when Daisy's only reply was a frustrated grumble. Miss Eliza seeks your opinion on the twill stuff. I threw back my head and laughed because, of course. Daisy's annoyance broke like a wave upon the shore. She huffed a chuckle, more amused with my amusement than the interruption, but made for the door. Okay. So we weren't talking about it. Cool. I could do not talking about it. Shit.
Wow. I am so impressed.
Not only look at those comments go. Hi, everybody.
I'm like, even though what's interesting is, even though this isn't my personal style of reading, I was so invested in this moment between these two characters because it was so well written and because you voiced the personality so well.
Oh, thank you.
I feel like you did a really excellent job of doing a live reading. And I feel like I was just pulled in the moment. I loved the back and forth. I really appreciated. We had the two characters in the beginning, her and the one guy. And I thought there was like some witty banter there. And then we're switching to the two girls. And I thought that was very, very fun. And then you kind of get that moment. You're like, okay, they're going to go into this whole like closed door type scene. And then that breaking moment of the other character. So that was fun. That was very, very well done.
Thank you. Shadow the Hedgehog says it gives a fantasy world vibe. Thank you.
Ooh.
Thank you. I mean, I'm an SFF writer, and this was the first time that I was doing historical fiction. So I'm not surprised that my historical fiction comes off sounding like fantasy. But it is. I mean, here's the thing. I just finished writing an article about this for another writing series. Everything we know about history is fantasy in a way. They say history was written by the victors. It's also rewritten by dramatists and costumers. There is no such thing as 100% historically accurate. Jane Austen is accurate because Jane Austen was writing contemporarily. So she's a contemporary writer. When people say, oh, Jane Austen is historical fiction, no, she's a contemporary writer from 200 some odd years ago. So anytime we look at something like Julia Quinn's Bridgerton, that's fantasy. And we know that's fantasy because there are things that she's put in it that maybe were poorly researched, or maybe somebody made up 100 years ago and everybody took it as fact by mistake. Or, I mean, like the fact that people say, oh, Napoleon was short. Napoleon wasn't short. Napoleon was average sized for the time. But 100 years later, somebody was like, oh, I misread what a French foot is versus what an English foot is. And he sounds miniature. He's not. It's just somebody did the math wrong. And then it became a fantasy. So historical writers, as much as we are like, as accurate as we can be and as much research as we can be, there are things that we can never know. And there are things that we can never do. And there are things that we can never touch or taste or recreate. I mean, we can't make specific ancient Roman dishes because there's Salvium, I think is what it's called, was a specific herb that is in everything. And because it was in everything, it's now extinct. We can't recreate those dishes. Although I think they found it somewhere in Hungary last summer. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Everybody go watch Tasting History by Max Miller.
So Jess, so I absolutely loved that reading. I think that
Mm.
was really, really fun. For any of our writers or anyone watching this, where can they go check it out? Where can they go find out more about you?
So you can find my website, jmfrey.net. I will have everything there. And then my social media is j.m.frey, everywhere.
Awesome. I will drop that in the chat for anybody who wants to go check that out. If you're watching on YouTube, it's also linked down in the YouTube description down below. All right. Beautiful, beautiful. So with that, let's move over to some Q&A. So I know we've gotten a couple questions here in the chat. If you have a question for Jess or myself about fan fiction, anything that we've talked about today, drop it here in the comments and we'll bring it up. Now, I know we actually had what I really love. We have a technical question, a technical writing question here, which super
Okay.
good. I'll give my 2 cents, but I'm curious now that we've seen your writing, now that we've seen it on screen, I'm curious how you would solve this problem. So Shadow asked, question, I'm currently making a story and I'm trying to find good ways to keep sentences that explain my story's events interesting and written right without so many ands and alsos.
My instinct would be write it the way you want and then do a global search and find for and delete them.
I like that.
Because it's, and then he said.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're done writing the book, search for and then, and delete and then. He said.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he said. Or also is unless we're talking about it in dialogue. I mean, there's nothing wrong with ands and alsos colloquially at the beginning of a sentence. Rules were made to be broken as long as you understand why the rules exist in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But it does clean up the prose. So for me, I know one of my big problems is clearly when a character, especially if it's a first point of view, the person says he was clearly upset. I could see that he was clearly upset. I'll write the story how I want, and then I'll go do a global find replace and look for I could see that and clearly, and see that I put it in like 700 times and choose 5 of them to keep. I think that's the easiest way to do it. Write how you want to write and then fix it in the editing.
And I think my 2 cents to that, what I would add is, first off, as an editor, so as a book editor, this is what I would recommend. What draft, what stage of the writing process are you at? If you're still working on the rough draft of your story and you haven't completed a full manuscript or you haven't completed a full draft, don't worry about it. Do not worry about it if you are on the rough draft. Once you get through the rough draft and you go through later drafts, you can start cutting back and refining. Your control find method is great when it's ready for revision and it's ready for editing. If the question is more like stylistically, like, okay, well, what do I write instead? If you're like, okay, I feel like I use and 1,000 times, I control find 600 instances of and. It feels like it's too much. Go online, go Google, go use ChatGPT, go find a list of other examples for resources and understand what are other options for things that you can go do and find as alternatives.
Yeah. And also, so I just saw a follow up in the chat where you said I just don't want to add so many of them. That's fine. But remember the first draft, the only person who's reading the first draft is you. And the only person you're telling the story to in the first draft is yourself. So if you find yourself getting annoyed with it, your annoyance will eventually train you out of it. That has happened to me where I caught myself using however and yet for every paragraph transition. And about the 4th time I noticed it, I was like, why am I doing this? Delete, 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 delete. Your own annoyance will train you out of it. And if it doesn't, then who cares? The only person who's going to read that draft is you. That's what the editing's for.
Every writer and manuscript that I've edited, every single one has about anywhere between 5 to about 20 words that are overused. Like every single writer has words that they overuse because we're trying to tell 30,000, 50, 100,000 word stories. Of course, you're going to rely on certain words. And sometimes we catch them, sometimes we don't. But through the process of practicing, you'll find more sentence variety just through trial and error.
And the more you do it, the more I just started a sentence with and. Now I'm very aware of it.
Now you're going to start, and this is what I think.
And the more you do it, the more you will catch yourself. I think it's a non-issue. I think don't worry about it. The way you fix it is stop worrying about it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I actually there's a really good question that came to mind because I want to try to help out the writers here in the chat. Can you recommend any specific strategies for writers to leverage their fan fiction experience when pursuing traditional or self-publishing avenues?
Well, so query letters. Mm-hmm. When you write a query letter, you have a metadata paragraph. So this is 130,000 word cozy, contemporary cozy queer romantasy. These are the comparables. This is this. And then you give, this is why I'm submitting it to you. I think your favorite color is purple. My favorite color is purple. I think we would be purple friends forever. And then you give the 1 to 3 paragraph description of your book. And then you have at the very bottom of your query letter, the why I am awesome paragraph. And when people are putting together the why I am awesome paragraph, I always say to them, have you ever finished anything? Have you finished your doctorate degree? Have you finished a thesis? Do you write for a newspaper? Do you submit a column every week on time and in the correct word count? Have you ever finished a fan fiction? And you don't want to link them to the fanfic. Especially for me, I have fan fiction that's been up since the early 90s. People don't need to read how I've evolved as a writer. But if you say, I have written 30 fan fictions, completed each of them, I've had over 2 million reads across my fan fiction. These are metrics that show you can finish what you start and people like your stuff. Right? Mm-hmm. So this is something that you can use for your I am awesome paragraph. I think that's great. And especially if you're posting on Wattpad, you have average numbers of views. You can see how many comments you've had. You can do it on AO3 too. You can go into AO3 and look at your stats and cite your stats, because even if this is the first original book you've ever done, if you say I have over 10,000 followers and my books, my fan fictions are completely read within weeks, that's something you can put in your I am awesome paragraph.
I really like that. I think sometimes writers don't always think about what are things that I've done that can help elevate who I am as a writer,
and it makes you stand out, because I don't know the exact math off the top of my head, but it's something like only 16% of people who start a novel finish it. And of those 16%, only 6% of them polish it. And of that, so if you write
that's interesting. The stat I found online, I found that 97% of people never finish their first book.
Right?
It's like even worse.
so there's the math there. 97% of people never finish the book that they start. And of the 3% who finish their book, what percentage of that 3% polish the book? And then what percentage of that are comfortable sharing it with people? So if you write fan fiction and polish it and publish it, you are now in this percentile, right? Like, that's amazing. And you've practiced finishing something.
Jess, I want to say this has been an absolutely phenomenal conversation. A great chat today about fan fiction. Now, before we wrap up, there's always one final question I have to ask all my guests. If tomorrow was your last chapter in the book of life, and you could leave behind one original philosophy or quote with the writers and authors of the world, what would it be?
Finish it. Finish it. Just figure out what you have to do and finish it. Don't worry about the ands and the alsos. Don't worry about how perfect. Yeah, just do it. Like Nike says, just do it. Figure out what you need to do to finish it, because you can't make a story. You can't make a book until you've got something on the page. Doesn't have to be good.
Figure out what you have to do. Just do it. I absolutely love that. Jess, I want to say it's been such a great conversation. Thank you for joining me today. I know a lot of our community, I could tell, got a lot of value out of being able to talk about fan fiction, because it's one of those alternative writing formats that doesn't get talked about and doesn't get addressed very frequently, yet it's really popular. It's a really popular form of writing.
Yeah, it is. I'm going to give one more piece of advice. This is not my last chapter advice, but one more piece of advice for people who don't understand why you would write fan fiction, or thinking maybe whether or not they want to write some. I believe it was Wayne Gretzky who said, before you can skate in the NHL, you have to put 10,000 hours of practice on the ice. Fan fiction is 10,000 hours worth of practice.
I love that. I think that's an absolutely great way to close this off. I just want to say thank you for joining me today. This has been a great conversation about fan fiction. For anybody who wants to go find out more about you, once again, where can they find you?
www.jmfrey.net, and then j.m.frey on TikTok, Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky. I think I'm Sci-Frey, SCIFREY, on Tumblr. And if anyone wants to read my fan fiction, my username on AO3 is Losyark, Losyark.
Ooh, I love that. Losyark, Losy. You said ARK?
ARK.
Losyark. Well, that is absolutely awesome. And once again, it's all linked down in the YouTube description down below. I'm going to let you get going, but thank you again for joining me today. Really
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
And I'm sure we'll have to have you back. Right now we're hosting writing events every single season. So we're doing a lot here on the channel.
Good. Well, I might come join a writing sprint because I need to finish this damn book.
Well, you know what? I always put the offer out. Obviously we're doing writing sprints every day. Every Wednesday night is our writers group. So if you ever want to come hop on stream with us and come chat with other writers, very casual. A lot of writing conversations and writing sprints every Wednesday.
All right. Wednesday. Gotcha.
Awesome. All right. And with that, so what a great conversation today. Really, really happy about being able to deep dive and discuss fan fiction. That's something I haven't had the chance to really explore before. So as we're looking at creative writing on the Morrow, I'll be back tomorrow with a huge update. You're going to want to make sure that you do not miss out tomorrow. We're going to be having our Monday update stream. We actually have a couple announcements for the community. One of our bigger announcements, we will be talking about channel updates and the official announcement for the Fated Fantasy Fiction Contest, our next major holiday writing event, which is just around the corner. We're going to be talking through, what does the Fated Fantasy Contest look like? For those of you who've been in the community, you got to experience what our last fiction contest looked like back in October when we did our Freaky Friday fiction contest, and we were hosted by none other than Jezebel herself. Who is going to be hosting for us this time? What does Fated Fantasy look like? And are you ready to embark on writing that next flash fiction, so that way you can be involved with the community and maybe win a prize or two? So make sure to come join us tomorrow. We are going to be going live at, I want to say 3:30 p.m. Pacific, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, as we'll be talking about all those updates and some other exciting updates that you guys are not even ready for. So with that being said, if you want to go check out another episode of the Create Right Now podcast. I want to say we've currently done 7 or 8 episodes in season 2 specifically. And it's linked down in the YouTube description. All of the ones from social media and author branding, balancing writing with a day job, being a hybrid author, and much, much more. So go check those out. Link down in the YouTube description down below. And if you enjoyed the stream today, tap that like button. Help us show the algorithm that writing streams are cool. All right, my friends, thank you so much for joining us. But unfortunately, that brings us to the end of the stream. Don't forget, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kauffman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers.
Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Because it's time to write now.
Right now.